All right, so up till now, we haven't been talking about things that are complex at all. But I want to end. I want to end on the most complex, I think, subject of the day,
We'll see.
because it's so cutting edge that I think that the AI world has really only discovered it in the last month or so. And it's only been popularized in the last week or so. And maybe you may not have even heard about it, but maybe you have.
I'm starting to get scared here that I
Yeah. So when we started in this AI revolution, we were talking about that the bits of information that we were gathering were words or even parts of words. The training was done on words or parts of words. And then that training moved to phrases or parts of phrases, so that our bit, the thing that we were encapsulating in turning into I forget the word already, into a, yeah, never mind.
like
In,
a you're talking about like
token,
tokens or
into a token. Yeah. So then we were taking phrases, and phrases could be a token, and we were opening up the window, if you will, to, instead of a page, we were talking about the entire Harry Potter series, according to one pundit the other day, being the size of the inference windows now. What is now being talked about is that words and phrases are not big enough to train on. We're running out of the data to train on words and phrases. Not only are we running out of enough data, but the training, the potential for even training on those is we're running out. And so what the systems now need is an environment to become tokenized, if you will. And I don't fully understand. I kind of get it. Okay. So we're going from a phrase to an environment, which is going to be the humanoid's world. It's going to be the Tesla's car world. And the people that are talking about this, that I was listening to these various podcasts over the last few days, were talking about that basically self-driving cars like Tesla and the humanoids are the only place where we're going to be able to get this kind of data that will be the next training set. All right. Now, all that to say, I've been sitting here thinking all along that Tesla was going to be, so dependent upon Colossus. And all of a sudden, it may turn out that xAI is really dependent upon Cortex for the next phrase.
Yeah. So I admit fully that I'm not directly caught up on whatever this little trend is, and things move fast here. So,
Boy,
but let's step back a second and talk a little bit about what's happened here. When we started training these neural networks, we took language in written form and we converted it to tokens. And tokens are just representations. You can actually think of one token equals one word, but sometimes there's subwords, like, in a longer word, like super intelligence, there might be like 3 tokens there or something, right? And it was a way of encoding language into a bunch of numbers, because after all, the AI is working on numbers. It's not working on the actual word. So what's really super interesting about these LLMs, these large language models, is that they completely are changed from the input to the output to just a bunch of tokens. The LLM doesn't know word at all. There's a token translation on the way in, there's a token translation on the way out, and that just works. The inside and the interior is just numbers, and those numbers represent the words. So the reason that you did that, the reason computer scientists did that, is because they needed a way to, frankly, compress the input stream, down to something manageable. And so it's easier to train on an integer that represents a word than it is to look at the entire bytes of that word, and try to work it that way. And in a sense, it's more meaningful, right? Because you just have this one token that represents that thing. So now when you start thinking about where we need to go next, and we look at something like FSD, FSD's input is frames, video frames, and those are in a sense raw photon frames, if you will. And we talked about that previously, but to keep it simple, photons come in, that's a sort of an analog spectrum. It gets digitized down to these collectors, just like your camera does. And we're essentially counting the intensity of light through some filters. And then we take those and we put them together in some pixel dimension, a frame, a width and a height and certain resolution. And then we gather a bunch of those frames because if you step them over time, it's video, right? It goes from still image to video. And then we package those together, and that's this set of frames is what's used to both train and run the inference of FSD. So if we start thinking about that, now we're looking at, so FSD as a neural network doesn't deal with words, doesn't deal with tokens in that sense. It deals with digital data, but that digital data is really camera frames, to keep it simple. There's some other stuff, but camera frames. Mm-hmm. And so it's all visual data. And the AI learns from that visual data to both perceive and plan its moves to output its control values, accelerator, braking, steering. Okay. And it seems like magic. In some ways I think it is. In some ways I think it's just obvious, but both are probably true. Now let's go to something like Optimus, right? Optimus also is going to perceive the world in principally a visual way. May be able to touch and sense things from touch, and it's obviously going to understand audio or sound because it's going to use that. But it's a open-ended input stream, that doesn't end. In other words, its driving is really confined to roadways, and Optimus is not confined at all. It goes around the world like we do. So if you take something like Optimus and you take something like these embodied AIs, Optimus, and our friend FSD, and you kind of total up the set of eyes that are out there, it starts to exceed the human number of perceptors, sensors by a long shot. And so what's happening here is that it's a sort of flywheel effect. There's more and more input data that's not in written form, right? And frankly, written form is just compression anyway, if you think about it. Like, you and I have thoughts. If we can put our thoughts together in sentences and paragraphs, and we can write that article or write that book, and we can, in theory, educate somebody else. We have just compressed something. We've compressed all those thoughts, which are all sort of an input of stuff that started in the analog and ultimately ended up in the digital thing, which is the expression, which is words, right? We've literally compressed knowledge into something. Now, it may have been a very lossy compression. We may have missed things. Yeah. We may not be explaining well, but it's still that. Right. It's still that. Right. But vision, okay, yes, it is another analog to digital conversion of data, but it's so much more, right? It's so open-ended. And what we're going to see is just this incredible explosion of input data, right? Incredible explosion of input data. And so maybe that's what this whole area is, but even if it's not, I'm close to it, I'm sure, because I think then we end up in a circumstance where we're saying, well, all the things we said about energy, compute, inference are, like the inference required on Optimus. No wonder why Elon's doing AI-6, because Optimus is going to be one of the biggest inference machines on the planet. Yeah. Because it's not only going to have to perceive the world through vision and some other sensors, but it's also going to have to be a walking, talking CP3O to us, right? It has to deal with human language translated from the audio spectrum into into words and run through its own LM, call it Grok, whatever you want. And it's got to build up in a massive context window, because you're going to have an expectation that you could turn around and say to Grok, do you think that, or remember when we visited Randy's house, does Randy have this book on his shelf, or can you tell me all the books on Randy's shelf? That type of thing, right?
Yeah.
So, all of a sudden we have kind of a multimodal stream of information, principally vision, which is the heavy stuff, coupled with audio and some other sensor stuff, coming into this rather large environment that needs to run through an AI for proper outputs, whether that's responding to us or creating actions.